progress.
We now call the General Committee meeting to order. Tonight's General Committee meeting is being held with members of the General Committee, members of the Executive Management Team, the Deputy City Clerk, and the City Clerk in the Council chambers. Members of the Senior Leadership Team and other staff are available to answer questions in person and via video conference. The Council chambers remain closed to the public until further notice.
Recording in
First
progress.
item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For the consent agenda, I will read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of the General Committee may ask that an item be held. The Deputy City Clerk and the City Clerk in the Council chambers. Motion is deemed to be members of the Senior Leadership Team and other discussion are available to answer questions in person and via to the May 2nd City Council chambers remain closed to the public until further notice. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For the consent agenda, I will read out the title associated with the recommended motions printed on the agenda. Members of the General Committee may ask that an item be held. The Deputy City Clerk and the City Clerk in the Council chambers. Motion is deemed to be members of the Senior Leadership Team and other discussion are available to answer. First item on the consent agenda is investigate city procedures and policies to encourage greater diversity on city committees. Seeing nobody holding that, it's approved. Next item is participation in the It Starts With Me initiative. It's approved. Nominating a Senior of the Year. It's approved. Report of the City Building Committee dated April 12, 2022, Municipal Heritage Registry, 56 William Street. See no holds, it's approved. The Heritage designation of 125 to 127 Dunlop Street East. Nobody's holding that, it's approved. It's great to see another building on the Heritage designation. Next item is Bike the Night.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor McCann. We have a few staff reports tonight. First staff report is Municipal Names Registry, additional names.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor Kungle. Next item is the 2021 Budget and Business Plan Year-End Report. It's approved on consent. Next item is 2021 Year-End Development Charge Report and Treasurer Statement. See no holds, it's approved. 2021 Year-End Cash in Lieu of Parkland Report and Treasurer Statement. It is approved. 2022 Tax Ratios and Capping Policies. It is approved. Final staff report is South Shore Community Center Facility Users Agreement Renewal. It is approved. We have a few items for discussion tonight. The first one is pedestrian safety, Collier Street and Bayfield Street intersection. A request for a report. It's approved. Jonathan Court Catwalk, held by Councillor Thompson. And finally, moved by Councillors Rietma and Harris, being an act to amend the Controlled Drugs and Substance Act and to enact the expungement of certain drug-related convictions act and the National Strategy on Substance Use Act. Anybody want that held? It is approved, and maybe I'll just read that quickly. People don't know what it's about. That correspondence be sent to the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Dr. Carolyn Bennett, in support of the Private Members Bill C-216, being an act to amend the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and to enact the expungement of certain drug-related convictions act and a National Strategy on Substance Use Act. Okay. The first item held, we have no presentations tonight. We have no deferred business. The first item held was Bike the Night. Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. I guess the question goes out to the mover of the motion. I do know a little bit about this, so I thought I'd give the opportunity to maybe promote and have a few questions. I know that it was pretty successful in Guelph, and just want to maybe get a little background.
Councillor Elwin.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. I'm actually not the mover of the motion, but this came through the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee and then was passed unanimously at City Building as well. But I'm happy to speak to it briefly. So this event is the first time it'll be happening in Barrie. It'll be happening in Ward 2, which is why this motion is before us tonight and why I'm looking to support the work of the committee with some funding from my expense budget. There are more details on Facebook, on the Bike the Night Facebook page, and I've got to give a shout out to Councillor Kungle and to volunteer members of the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee who are taking the lead on organizing this. I think it's going to be a fantastic way to promote active transportation, and there's more to come for sure. It's in early stages, and we'll be sure to promote all the details to council and to the public once we know more.
Councillor McCann?
So should I direct maybe to Councillor Kungle then, please? Basically some details, like when is it, what do you expect? I mean, it's kind of pretty vague.
Okay. Councillor Kungle?
Thank you. So in supplement to Councillor Elman's details, it is right now booked for September the 14th. I'm not looking at my calendar, but that's the Saturday. And the rain date's the 24th. We are collaborating with Open Air Dunlop, so the BIA, the health unit, and we're right now just finishing the permit through city staff around details. So the scope of it right now is looking at meeting and maximizing resident interest and engagement. We're also looking at promoting overall active transportation. So we're asking individuals who are able to join us downtown with their bicycles as a family event. It's not a race, but we have a route mapped. We will be working with Barrie Police to confirm that the route is acceptable, and we will be then kind of doing a leisurely guided bike ride through the downtown and finishing back at Meridian Place. And right now we're also engaging around options to do education. So one great opportunity identified through the committee was having Barrie Transit bus there and actually showing residents how to rack your bicycle on the bus. So you're taking multimodal options for active transportation, leaving the car behind and understanding how to use a bus to get to where you need, and then maybe finishing a destination or enjoying some of our trails in the city by bike. So lots more detail to come. Again, it wasn't fleshed out because it was buy-in first to make sure the city would support the concept that Guelph has done. It's moving along really, really well, but we are just actually detailing out objectives of the night. We want to make sure we've got some metrics to hopefully promote this as an annual event. So love to see, and we'll be engaging all members of council and staff to join us, but also June is Bike Month, so we'll be getting some messaging out in June to promote this. As Councillor Elwin indicated, you can find an early days Bike the Night poster and Facebook page, but really we haven't launched the event yet publicly, so we'll be doing some of that and making sure staff and Barrie Police are comfortable with the route and the details.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you for that. And I guess I've got some, one concern maybe. I'm just wondering why Councillor Elwin, is using his expense budget, and maybe it's maybe not appropriate, or maybe was appropriate. I'm not sure who's really pushing this, but I really would like to see our community involved. For $2,000, that you need to promote this event. I mean, there's many bike stores that I sure would jump on this promotion. There are restaurants that would love to jump on this promotion, and I think it would be a great community event to actually have the public involved to raise the $2,000. So I did have a bit of an amendment tonight for this that I was going to suggest that Councillor Erwin goes out and raise the money, and I would suggest I would team up with him and I would help him raise the other money towards this event. But this is a city staff agenda. I just don't know now if that's appropriate. I guess my amendment would be that staff and Councillor Elman reach out to the community to see if there are opportunities to raise the $2,000. If it doesn't be successful in a week, then we divert the money coming from Councillor Elman's council fund to the community benefit fund.
Okay, ask the clerk first of all to have that amendment.
Deputy Mayor Ward, I believe the understanding of the amendment is that to delete the funding currently coming from Councillor Ewan's account to work with city staff to fundraise the $2,000. And if the fundraising is not successful, then the monies would come from the reinvestment reserve.
Okay, and Councillor McCann, I understand you, really, the next week is what you were talking about? Is that what you said?
Sure, maybe we'll give 30 days then, 30 days to raise the funds.
After next week.
And if it's
that's great.
September, and I don't want to slow the machine down at all, so therefore, knowing that if we can't raise the money privately, right, then it falls back on the community benefit fund. So therefore, there's no stalling, and I just think that this is a major missed opportunity that private businesses, especially in the downtown, would jump on. And I'd be happy to help.
Okay. Yep. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Elwin first on the amendment.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. I find this amendment actually incredibly inappropriate and disrespectful for a couple of reasons. Councillors have an expense budget that is up to their discretion to spend on what they think the community would like them to spend it on. Never once has a councillor questioned when councillor budgets have been spent on billboards, on ice cream, on newsletters, and now I'm proposing to spend some money on a community event and in working with people in the community. I think this is entirely inappropriate, and I would suggest that Councillor McCann withdraw the motion and have some respect.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Elwin. I've got Councillor Morales and Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. I share a bit of the confusion about how council has oversight over councillor expenses, something I've always said over the years as a councillor's communications budget, and now the new community benefits fund is their own. We all spend on different things. I've been part of those billboards, I've been part of those ice creams, I've done radio, I've done different forms, and that's it. As long as the finance department signs off on it, then it's so be it. Sometimes they've said no to me on some things, and I respect their decisions. So I respect the councillor's autonomy on this, and Councillor Alwyn, as long as the mayor's office approves it, I'll actually add $1,000 from the Ward 9 fund to this.
Councillor Kungle.
Thank you. If I made a compliment, and I apologize if I misspeak or this is deemed to speak for you, Councillor McCann, but perhaps if the amendment was withdrawn, we could consider an interest about Councillor Ireland's funding, that which is offered by Councillor Morales and the public. So I do appreciate the interest around what I heard from you was supporting getting donations from community. I think this matter is just happening before we are able to communicate details publicly. There are conversations with the subcommittee on a budget. We do, I believe, have a sponsor. We cannot share that yet. Hopefully one of many, but there is part of us finishing the permit, making sure we have all of our ducks in order, and details will then help us to go out with an invitation, whether that is a business that wants to purchase a helmet and we can do a draw and have some different engagement events, whether that's a bingo prize and we can have an education series of things happening where you're learning about city infrastructure, roads, bike safety and otherwise. So I think it's at the beginning stages. I do compliment Councillor Aylwin because it is an event in his ward and as a champion of active transportation to be starting this off. So my impression is I think it's just the beginning of what we can do, but this was vetted through. It was presented. I would have expected staff or the clerk to identify if that expense was an inappropriate source for funding, and I think it's great. The Active Transportation Sustainability Committee, maybe as a point of note, to my understanding, does not have a budget. Some other committees actually have had a budget committed to them. So this was not coming back to council to ask for funding, knowing that it was appropriately aligned to a Ward 2 initiative and out of the kindness of Councillor Aylwin to start off ensuring that we could start pushing this from a communications and that we would have a budget to do so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. Maybe through you to the clerk, maybe this is why it's creating some confusion. Spending our expense budget does not require council approval, does it? This is the part maybe that's confusing me, and maybe it's created some of the confusion tonight.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Harris. Just want to clarify the actual account that everyone is speaking to. It's the account that's administered that the treasurer and I sign off on, not the one that's administered through the mayor's office. So that, I just want to put that as clarity. The other thing is, no, these matters don't usually come to council. The reason it's on the agenda tonight is A1, speaking for Councillor Kungle, the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee does not have a budget to run such events, as well as this is so that Councillor Aylwin or the event organizers can spend, Councillor Aylwin does not have to go out of pocket for the expenses and then get reimbursed. This would allow for that automatic reimbursement from his account instead of submitting the expense, paying for it, and then being reimbursed.
Okay, that helps. I was trying to figure out why it was, an expense was coming before council when a councillor could just authorize and support. Okay, maybe I'll hold it there because there might be other comments and maybe there's some compromises that can be made. And this sounds like a great event. I saw the one in Guelph, so as a cyclist as well, I understand the importance, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Owen?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. I just wanted to sincerely thank Councillor Morales, Councillor Kungle, and Councillor Harris for their comments, and Councillor Morales for your offer of support. I think that's incredibly generous and good of you. And I think this event is going to be wonderful for the city and for Ward 2, and I can't wait to see all of you there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Ready for the vote? This is the vote on the amendment. All in favor? All opposed? It's defeated. And we're back to the original motion on the floor. Any comments or questions? Councillor Kungle?
Maybe just a quick comment. I'll ensure, unless it has to come back as a point of information, we're going to try and get some media on this. So I know there is curiosity about this and eagerness to support and to get more information to residents across the city. So I'll make sure that once we have the permit approved, we can pass something through the clerk's office to council as a point of information in advance of media.
Okay, Councillor Morales and then Councillor McCann.
Perfect. Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. Maybe to make some lemonade out of lemons, now that that amendment was defeated, and whether it's Councillor McCann or any councillor, I'm sure it'd be an additional story in the media of either your assistance or someone else teaming up to match those existing city funds and even doubling, tripling them, et cetera. Because again, we know you can fundraise. There's no doubt about that. And again, that's additional media coverage that plays to what you basically said this earlier, Councillor Kungle. I'm just repeating words. So yeah, hopefully there's an opportunity to X factor the money.
Councillor McCann?
Yeah, I'll just maybe add a little bit that I am 100% in favor of this. This is going to be an amazing event. You know, I'm an avid cyclist myself and did charity events last year with cycling and raising, food for the food bank. Thank you. And this year I'm planning on doing something even bigger and better for that. So I'm love the idea. I just thought that this money should really come from the community, not just one councillor. So if they've got an issue with that, that's something beyond my understanding. But I just think this is a great initiative, and I definitely will be help promoting and probably count me in actually participating in the event as well. So it'll be a lot of fun. And maybe next week, once I get maybe more information, maybe I could bring some donations to the event. But I'm a little twixt in between if you're looking for donations or not. Okay. So maybe you can reach out to me later on, and I'd be happy to help out. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I will call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Okay, next item on the agenda that was held was the Municipal Names Registry. Councillor Kungle.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor Barry Ward. I would like to table the item as written and add an amendment.
Go ahead.
I would like to add paragraph 2, that the motion municipal names registry be amended to add the following paragraph. That staff in the Development Services Department give consideration to adding the names of the Barrie Flyers players identified in the correspondence dated March 30th, 2022, to myself, Councillor Kungl, from C. Garapi and A. Garapi, to the street name listing and report back to General Committee. And I can speak to that.
Go ahead.
I had the lovely opportunity of sitting down with Chris Garapi. Some of you may know him from being quite a champion of the Bay Cats and also quite involved in our local Legion. To that end, learned about the history of our Barrie Flyers hockey team. And we had some conversation about heritage, so this might lean to other members of council around the table at a later date. But Mr. Garapi kindly provided a document on some of the local history of the way in which Barrie Flyers came to be and the individuals involved in the first couple of years of that team. So our conversation spanned from street naming opportunities, knowing that we've got quite a lot of development happening, but also you're finding that this is coming as a bit of a document for context because the desire is to make sure that it's not necessarily one or two names off of a team that's considered, but perhaps should a development happen in a neighborhood, maybe the names of the majority of players within a season could actually be reflected within a new neighborhood subdivision, or reflected on the walls of schools through partnership, or in some way highlighted in the any new community centers. So this is specific to street naming, and knowing that through my understanding with staff, there's a process to vet names to make sure that there's no conflict with any other current names from a 911 and dispatch. And so the information Mr. Garapi provided would now, upon your approval, go to be vetted by staff, and then we'll hear back about what might be recommended out of the options that were given in the document. So I would refer council to that document if you want further details. And then I believe we'd have further conversation about how that could maybe move for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, so the amendment is to add the names.
Bear.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Mr. Councillor Natalie Harrison.
No worries. Through you, Deputy or Acting Mayor Ward, I absolutely approve this. I think it's a brilliant idea. These are some amazing women in sports, and they did such a great job this year again. Kudos to Councillor Kungl for bringing this forward. It's exciting. It's great.
I think Councillor Kungl may want to clarify something.
Sure, thank you. And I know we've been there's lots of great sport happening. The Colts are in playoffs tonight. Go Colts! But just my apologies if I wasn't clear. So I know we've been really highlighting the Junior Sharks and the ladies hockey this year. This one's going to take us back to 1945, 1950 with the very first men's hockey team that represent the city. So lots of great heritage, and I'm sure more names to come as we grow recognition around athletes from our community.
Okay, so the amendment is to add the Barrie Flyers to the street, to have staff investigate adding the names from the Barrie Flyers to the street names, and the three that we are approving tonight are Kenyon, McPhee, and Wolvet. Okay, so you've heard the amendment. All in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Morales, that you're voting.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. To staff, I'm looking here at the staff report, and it says the policy, the municipal naming. I'm trying to get the wording right. Hold on. The municipal naming policy. In a short summary, how does the municipal naming policy go about putting names into the list and then letting them bubble up to being used?
Okay, I'm not sure who can answer that. Oh, Michelle Banfield is online. Ms. Banfield?
Thank you very much for the question. Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Morales. Really, actually, anybody can, there's a form on our city's website. Anybody can put a name forward. And at that time, it can come at any time throughout the year. And usually when staff have, it, like in this case, a couple to present to council, we will do that. So that information, as I said, is on the city's website. There's a little form that people can fill out. We do the vetting, and then we report back to council to add them to the list. But anybody can do it at any time.
Ms. Banfield, through you, Acting Mayor Ward, to Ms. Banfield, how does city staff decide, yes, that name meets emergency, like that's pretty standard, but once it passes the emergency standards requirements, how does city staff decide, yes, we're going to bring this back to council for approval to add to the registry versus, no, thank you, we don't want, Bodie McBoat Lane or something? What's the decision? Is it merit-based? Is it based on number of requests? Is there some sort of ranking of historical significance? How does that work?
Ms. Benfield?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Morales. So city staff really vet the requests through the 911 adjacent municipalities. We vet it through that process as well as the actual city naming process. So the only names that we outright reject are if they don't meet any one of those criteria. Anything that does meet those criteria, we bring back to council, and then we do that little bit of rationale and a bit of the history of why the names were brought forward, and council can make that decision to add those street names to the list.
Perfect. And do you know roughly how many names there are in the list right now, the registry?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to council. No, off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that information for you.
Okay, perfect. The only reason I was asking those questions, I'm supportive of it. I was talking very, very briefly to Councillor Jim Harris just now, and there's obviously deep roots and deep historical significance among the families, the players, the history, and we're a hockey town, so I totally respect that. I just wanted to know that, there were quite a few names here, so how does that affect our current list? I know that we just passed earlier today an initiative about making committees more diverse, but does that also come to our naming our streets? I know that's been said in the past. And then finally, there's also lots of other sports teams. I know baseball, the Baycats have been very successful. Young players who have passed away while playing in sports teams might also be something to consider in addition to notable NHL alumni and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of understand what the magnitude of bringing these in has on a totality, and maybe it opens up the gates, but maybe it's worth opening up for other people to bring names forward. So that's where my questions came from, not a place of criticism. So I'll be supportive of it.
Okay, any other comments or questions? I just wanted to say I'm delighted to see Dr. Jim McPhee's name on here. I had the good fortune to speak to him at length many years ago when I was campaigning. He lived in my ward, and I knocked on his door, and that was the end of my campaigning for the night because I spent an hour, more than 2 hours, talking to him. He was just the most fascinating person, but his stories, especially about the Second World War, in which he was a prisoner. Okay, so all in favor? It is carried. One more item on the agenda. That is, the main motion as amended. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Main motion as amended. All in favor? It is carried. Now we'll move on to the final item on the agenda, which is Jonathan Court Catwalk. Councillor Thompson held this item.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. Just to the councillor who's requesting the item for discussion, it's very vague. If maybe you could elaborate on the behaviors that are occurring. I have a few other questions, but I'll let you answer that one if that's...
Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward, and thank you, Councillor Thompson, for the question. So there's been an ongoing issue with some students from Barrie North congregating in the area of Jonathan Court, and they use this catwalk to access Jonathan Court. There's been some altercations that have taken place. There have been issues with litter, with loitering, with trespassing. Constable Kira Brooks with the Community and Safety Wellbeing team has been involved and engaged with the school. The school has been very engaged and trying to find solutions to those ongoing issues in the area. One of the things that the residents on the court have asked for is that we look at closing the catwalk. There was some mixed reaction from the school about that, but they did say it was worth exploring. So I'm hoping that we can get some more information on what it would take to do that. And I don't think it would be a be-all and end-all solution, but it is one of the only tools in our toolbox right now to address this ongoing concern. It's been happening now for about a year, and I'm happy to answer any more questions on that.
Thanks. And just a follow-up to that, if you may, Deputy Mayor Ward. I actually reached out to the police today just to see volumes and stuff like that. And to the record, it's no different than, you know, any other school area and stuff. And, you know, doing a little bit of research, you know, kids will be kids. And, you know, we should have a little bit of hope in our youth that, you know, sometimes it's just a cycle and, you know, kids are coming out of COVID and stuff because the catwalk's been there a long time. My son actually goes to North, doesn't use the catwalk, but, you know, kids are out and about and stuff like that. But, you know, I think there is some issues, but I think that occurs around a lot of schools. I find it hard to support this. I think it's bad precedent setting. Like, you know, we talk about the walkable community, the connectivity. It's just, yeah, I don't even think it's worth wasting staff's time or, you know, I think that we find ourselves trying to solve problems. Like, this is a school issue if it's the kids, like, where I don't think we should start closing catwalks for a behavior. You know, like, this is a slippery slope. If we start looking at closing things because they create behaviors that, you know, it's something I don't want to participate in. And I think we need to solve problems than just reacting on this. You know, I had conversations with a couple counselors that I know that their kids went to North and stuff, and there was no issues then. So it could be a cycle, but like I said, I think this is a really slippery slope to go down where a behavior occurs somewhere due to something and we look to remove it. So I'll leave it there for now. But yeah, I understand and I appreciate that you've spoken with residents and stuff, but yeah, I can't support closing the catwalk.
Okay, I'll get to you, Councillor Elwin, but Councillor Kungels wants to speak next.
So I'll speak from being in contact with residents who happen to have children in Ward 2 that live in Ward 3 and are experiencing this, and did some outreach. And while I'm not directly involved in the history, you know, I did, through Councillor Elwin and Constable Brooks, be able to identify that this has been, I think, conversations maybe even from November. And so while I appreciate, and I've even dealt with situations where, you know, is infrastructure a solution? But I don't know if it's a soft edit to the motion about that being one among other options, because I know there have been many conversations about, while the school has been at the table having lots of conversation about what's possible, because it's migrating off of school property and onto a city area, there's been extensive conversation with residents around reporting and trying to adopt a reporting tool. I think there are many dynamics in this one, so I would say I'm maybe more closely aware of how many parents might be really interested to see what could come of this, or just is there something the city can offer to support coming to the table with an option to at least on the interim make it safer? If it's not closing the catwalk, then are there other options, or what can we do? So I think it's really just at least being able to provide something back that's been vetted through staff around options. I'm not sure if anything viable's been indicated to date. I know this has been an ongoing conversation, so I want to add that just for some additional context. It may not solve it, but I think it's around, is there something we can explore? Maybe perhaps the motion can be broader to closing the catwalk, or other options we can provide, or play a more formal hand in around coming to the table with options.
I guess Councillor Elwin and Councillor Natalie Harris, Jim Harris, and Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. I think Councillor Thompson actually makes some very great points, and points that I've been grappling with ever since this issue came to my attention. I'm looking back at my email here, and it looks like March of 2021 was the first time that I was contacted by a couple of the residents of Jonathan Court about the issue. I share those concerns, and was very reluctant to actually bring this forward for the reasons that you stated. However, this is a motion to get some more information back from our staff on, the implications of closing this catwalk, what's the cost, etc. It isn't just a blanket motion to close it. I think it's reasonable to get this information so that we know what options we have on the table. I know also I've been in contact with Kira Brooks, the constable at the Very Police, like I said, and she did say to me about a week and a half ago that she knows it's been a mixed bag about closing the catwalk. However, that is the only solution I see at this time. And it's that sort of advice that's gotten me to this point of moving this motion and moving the ball forward on this one potential solution that could have an impact on the ongoing issues. Again, not a panacea, but I think it could help with the situation, and I think we owe it to the residents to at least explore that option, and that's why I brought it to council this evening.
Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you. I will disclose that without that catwalk, I probably have been late to high school many times as a young person, having lived there for about 26 years beside the catwalk without any incidents. So I know the area fairly well. And then again, my brother lives there still today, so I know the residents there very well. And I can say that those that I've spoken to don't want it closed. So I'm not sure who's being spoken to, maybe a few people with an interest. So I will ask this question of, through you, Acting Mayor Ward, to Councillor Thompson as Accessibility Committee representative. Is closing walkways something that committee is generally in favor of?
Councillor Thompson.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Jim Harris. Actually, no. We have something coming up on the agenda already, and we had in the past at looking at maintaining the catwalks through 12 months of the year, which we actually had a discussion at budget time with cleaning them because of the Accessibility Committee's recommendation and discussion. So they are actually utilized by people with mobility issues and stuff because of it shortens the distance for them, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, thank you. And I would assume the follow-up is you have not had any consultation on this matter from the people involved? Your committee hasn't been asked about this particular walkway being closed?
This item for discussion, it was never brought up at the Accessibility Committee.
Okay,
Actually, it was the opposite. We had somebody reach out to actually, like I said, try to fix some of the broken asphalt ones and maintain them, because as we learned in the committee, there's been a lack of maintenance on some of them due to budget restraints.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I brought forward the winter maintenance item on behalf of residents to that committee because it seemed like the right place to go with the walkways and accessibility item. Just a question maybe again for you, Acting Mayor Ward, to maybe Ms. Banfield, if she's online. Would the Accessibility Committee's recommendation be an important part of a staff review of this item?
Ms. Banfield, is that a question for you, or maybe it's for Mr. Arian and Sundrum?
Mr. Sundrum, I'm sorry.
Yep. Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Harris. When we report back on this, we will consider all aspects that relate to this item, including various issues as it relates to various easements that may exist within the catwalk, and also what happens on a long-term basis if we were to close it. So we would look at all aspects of the closure.
Great, thank you. And maybe a follow-up. If you're reviewing this, would it be helpful to know that there's only 4 houses that completely border the walkway? If 2 out of 4, one facing Davidson, one facing Jonathan, didn't want it closed, would that be part of the investigation too?
Mr. Arian Sundrum?
Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Harris. Not sure I can answer that at this point. I think we would take a fulsome review and also assess what the residents in the vicinity of the catwalk, what their views are. We would definitely take that into account.
Great, thank you. So, yeah, a lot being made over a walkway, but I think when we look about accessibility and walkable communities and even the on-the-move work through the school board and the city of Barrie trying to make it easier for children to walk to school, I can tell you from lived experience that that walkway served many families. I can give you lots of names. The neighborhood has been transitioning, as neighborhoods do, from younger families to mature families to seniors to younger families. So this is where they're at. So I'm not sure, again, it kind of came through me because my brother lives there and I lived there much of my life. But it served the community extremely well. It's not a walkway if you know the area, if you've actually taken a bother to go look at it. It's probably one of the best designed ones because you actually pretty much see through it. There's no place to hide. I used to cut it as a kid because the city was not as fast as my parents wanted them to be. So I just don't see the merit. Families still use it. The circle is still a great place to bring your kid to ride a bike. It's an old school, has the grass in the middle kind of court. So I really think it's maybe we're reacting to somebody's concern about what the real problem is. If you've spoken to the residents, it's the creek, which is bordered by Bothwell, Jonathan, Grove Street. And you can see the kids sitting on a bench, which they've taken from McMorrison Park, over to the creek to sit and do their thing. I drove by this morning. They're sitting there on the bench. So I don't think we want to make our community less accessible, less walkable, because there's a problem somewhere else that won't be solved by closing the walkway. Because you can walk down from Barrie North quite nicely on Grove Street and walk straight into the area where they're hanging out. So I think also, this is an issue too, if we're talking about walkways around high schools, hopefully our next council will support the youth committee, which will be a really great place to talk about high schools, walkways, and the behaviors associated with it. So I would really encourage folks not to support this amendment. I think it needs a lot more TLC and maybe some thought. And the neighbors that I've spoken to don't want it closed. They've lived there for a combined 100+ years and don't want it closed. Now, there may be somebody who's been there a couple of years who wants it closed, but it's served the community for a long time. So anyway, and I never would have got to high school on time without it, so I'll close with that.
Thank you, Councillor Jim Harris. Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. Yeah, a lot of the questions I had were actually answered through the other Councillor Harris, which is great. But my feedback would be that I am going to approve this for the research component of it, and I respect that this is Councillor Aylwin's ward, so he probably has the most information in the background as to what residents are looking for. So with that, I think because investigate the feasibility doesn't mean just is it good or bad to close it. Like, what are the other options? What other things can we bring forward? maybe this will be not the first time that a catwalk is needed to, have an alternative method for accessibility. So this is a good start to finding that out. And I'm sure accessibility will be probably the top of their list, of staff's list, as to making sure that that isn't jeopardized or made so there was not another option. And when the options come forward, if this passes, then we can discuss those in a little bit more detail. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Harvey, and then Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. Question for the mover of the motion. Has this catwalk gone through a full SEPTED review and report prior to this coming to council?
Councillor Elwin. Sorry, what was the term you used?
SEPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design.
Okay.
It's a review that typically it's the police that will do that.
Okay.
Analyze it for an area using those principles.
Okay. Councillor Elwin.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward, and thank you, Councillor Harvey, for the question. As I mentioned, Kira Brooks with the Barrie Police has been engaged. She is trained in SEPTED principles and has done an assessment of the area. And as I said, although there's a mixed reaction on the closure of the sidewalk, she does see it as the only solution on the table at the moment from a SEPTED trained officer with the Barrie Police.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up to that, though, what were the results of this SEPTED review? Do you have that information available to provide to us?
Councillor Owen.
I could reach out to Councillor Brooks and provide whatever information she has, absolutely.
Councillor Harvey.
Okay, thank you. I wish I was getting a different answer than that. I would have hoped that the councillor would have had that information and that this would have gone through a proper review before he brings us to council. We had quite an interesting conversation when we wanted to remove part of a sidewalk in another ward, and here now we're talking about a much longer section of a sidewalk that happens to go between houses, and as we've heard from other councillors, has been around probably longer than I've been alive. I just have difficulty in pushing this on to staff without some additional background work being done prior to this motion coming forward. So as a result, I will not support this.
Councillor Kungle and Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Barrie Ward, and maybe to Councillor Aylwin. Could you clarify if the intention, it might just be a good point of clarification for me, is a permanent closure, or is it really about maybe something quick that could be done before school is out to at least do this in tandem with other efforts the school is doing, and just help to kind of mitigate this, or is the intention a permanent closure?
Councillor Owen.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Kungle. So the motion is actually to investigate the feasibility of closing the sidewalk. So it's not even to close it. So I think there's a bit of misunderstanding from Councillor Harvey. This is about getting that review done so that we can actually look at the potential solutions. I want to look at all of those issues that have been mentioned so far, very valid concerns around accessibility, active transportation, and then make a determination based on having all the information in front of us. And a lot of that work a lot of the work from the police perspective has been done, and I can happily share that with Councillor Harvey and others, but the intention is to investigate the feasibility of closing it, period, not to close it right away, not to just put up a fence tomorrow. So just want to make sure that that's clear.
Councillor Kungle.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I guess, and I'm not sure if it's just, and this is not to be critical of the framing, but I do having had some background conversations with parents and Constable Brooks and others, knowing that this, was never first on the list. It's not an easy ask. It has taken dialogue, and I do align with the concerns around closing a catwalk from an accessibility, but I do appreciate that the intention is actually not to do a firm closure, but to get information. And I have had safety concerns where, residents asked, why aren't you even looking at that consideration? So even if it's turned down by this council tonight, or even if information is brought back and it's not favored, it might be helpful to have that as a point of being able to communicate back to families about rationale for anything that may or may not get supported forward. So I see that almost being one of many options I'm hoping could come back as alternative solutions too. I know questions have been asked about, have we ever put a security camera on a catwalk for a temporary measure? Is that more cost effective or not than closing a catwalk? Is it even possible if we try to close it, it would even be an effective measure? So I'll support it because I understand the intention, and I do have residents that are at least looking to hear a response to why or why not formally. But I do, it doesn't mean I'm pro closing a catwalk, but I am pro making sure we've got good information at hand to take to a very, I think, challenging situation where the city is being asked to put something on the table.
Councillor, when you were next, I'm not sure you've spoken what you were going to say, but you're next on the list.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was addressed through the answer to Councillor Kunkel's question. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? I'll speak briefly. I cannot support it because I know down the road I would never support taking sidewalks. Catwalks are part of our sidewalk system in the city of Barrie, and I could never support removing part of our sidewalk system. It's the very same arguments were used for the sidewalk in the south end just a few weeks ago, where people, their perception of the behavior that was taking place by the people using that sidewalk was the reason they used for removing the sidewalk. And this is the same thing. There's a perception that there's a problem there. There may be a problem, I don't know. But the bottom line is we can address those problems, but we should not be removing a sidewalk in anywhere in the city of Barrie. I know what Councillor Kunkel said, but the report in front of us, the recommendation in front of us says we ask staff to investigate the removal of the sidewalk. And so that is, and at the end of the day, I would never be able to support it. I think it's frustrating that the school board hasn't been able to address this issue. I thought it was very interesting, Councillor Thompson's remarks, that this has only been going on for a year, and I'm probably the councillor that my sons went to North, and I asked them both, and it was never a problem when they were going to school there. They'd never heard of it, and I think in another year it may not be a problem again. It's a very temporary thing, but if we close that catwalk, it will be closed for all time, and I think it would be a investigate it. Any other comments? Then all those in favor of the amendment to have staff investigate the feasibility of closing the catwalk? Against? It is defeated. Thank you, everybody. That is it for the items on the agenda. We are now at inquiries. Are there any inquiries from members of General Committee? Councillor Kunkel.
I do, and this, thank you, Acting Mayor Barry Ward. And this is actually maybe following on the item because there's some really interesting dialogue happening behind this. So while that failed tonight, maybe it'll change next week. Maybe it's a question to the clerk. Knowing that there is an interest to carry on this conversation in some way through Councillor Irwin to many stakeholders within that ward, could this item still be brought forward to a reference committee for further dialogue, be it city building, if it ties to that around other options to manage safety concerns on city property in areas like catwalks? Is there a way for us to have dialogue, or is that something that any one of us would just take to staff offline?
Ms. Cook? Is that for Ms. Cook?
Mm-hmm. Through you, Deputy Mayor Ward, to Councillor Kunkel. Staff can, members of council can always ask questions of staff, not just at the meetings. They can contact them directly during the day. But with respect to the matter that was just dealt with this evening, given that it lost, the only way we, the only kind of an amendment that could be brought forward next week is to refer it to refer the matter to another general committee meeting or a reference committee, and the appropriate one would be city building.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions on that matter. I do have some questions of staff related to questions a resident has asked to be brought forward. I'm just pulling those up. So as I'm just getting my computer to refresh, my apologies. We did have a resident ask a bit about the possibility of reconsidering an amendment to the fireworks bylaw with an interest to add more inclusion. And I had a couple of questions of staff because I realized it wasn't that long ago we actually created more restrictions within the fireworks bylaw around June 2021, and that came with a lot of great resident support and interest. So I was going to ask if staff could identify at this time, coming out of 2021 and those changes, my understanding was the City of Barrie was by far still more permissive around allowing fireworks to be let off in the residential property without a permit. Could staff talk to our municipality at all compared to others? And I'm assuming I would be referring that or directing that question to Ms. McAlpine.
Ms. McAlpine?
Thank you. Through Councillor Kungl, through Acting Mayor Ward to Councillor Kungl, Ms. Cook and I did a quick review of a number of larger municipalities and their restrictions related to fireworks. Barrie is one of the more permissive municipalities in terms of a right for family or backyard fireworks on more dates than most of the other municipalities. In other municipalities' cases, they limited fireworks to Canada Day and Victoria Day when those fireworks were let off by families or in their backyard. Community fireworks are addressed separately, similar to Barrie, where a permit may be issued for those. But in those communities, they were often much more restrictive in terms of the 2 times per year, in most cases, that they allowed those fireworks and any other fireworks that were permitted in by families or in backyards were by permit only.
Okay, thank you. And further question on the topic. So my impression of that, there was quite a bit of outreach around an appreciation of there being more restrictions that we included. And I was wondering if staff have heard the same or if you're hearing interest from the public in general.
Thank you.
Ms. McAlpine.
Councillor Kungl, I would say that family fireworks or backyard fireworks are something that are less appreciated by neighbors because of the uncertainty with the timing, the anxiety or trauma that may cause for pets or others, sometimes the length of them, and it's about fire safety. Community fireworks, ones that are hosted by the municipality or through a proper permit system or through a commercial permit system or other permit that have fire safety precautions in place and are generally associated with a community event are much better received in a lot of cases than backyard fireworks. And that's been a changing perspective, I would say, more recently.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, because I'm not sure if other members of council are getting this, but we do have, at least I've received some interest in seeing this formally opened up and reconsidered. So it's good to understand kind of how it's currently in place, the status of that bylaw and public perception of it. There has been some questions I've received about, can there even be temporary exemptions to a bylaw while it's in place? Can you speak at all, Ms. McAlpine, to the process for requests for allowing fireworks outside the current bylaw?
Thank you. Councillor Kungl, yes, an exemption, a temporary exemption is possible if someone makes an application through the clerk. It's intended as a one-time short-term allowance for a specific provision of the bylaw. It's typically attached to a specific person or place, and it's not broad or citywide. And for the clerk to be able to issue an exemption, it has to be in keeping with the overall intent of the bylaw. So if for an exemption from an individual is received, then that would be reviewed by municipal law enforcement staff. In some cases, they may require assistance from fires and emergency services, and then a report is made to the city clerk, and if it's in keeping with the intention of the bylaw, the clerk may issue an exemption. It's not a guarantee.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the time from council. I'm expecting that we might be getting some requests, so I wanted to kind of proactively see what the current status was on that and just to be able to share some accurate information forward should we be getting inquiries.
Okay, any other inquiries? not, move on to announcements. Any announcements from council members? Councilor Morales.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Ward. Finance Committee tomorrow at 6 p.m. Media has reported, obviously county's coming to present us, so anybody who's interested in watching that, 6 p.m. on YouTube tomorrow.
Okay, any other announcements? Seeing none, I have a few. I wanted to first of all start by thanking all those people in the community who took part in the spring clean on the weekend and even the end of last week. It's much needed. Compost and mulch are available for sale to Barrie residents at the Barrie landfill at 272 Ferndale Street Drive North. Bring a shovel and containers for loading your own compost, and wear appropriate footwear. For details and rates, visit barrie.ca/landfill. Volt Hockey has arrived in Barrie. The electronic chairs provide an accessible option for everyone to enjoy the sport of floor hockey. For more information, find out about special guests, or to register, visit play.barrie.ca or search Volt Hockey. The City of Barrie is hosting an online rain barrel sale until April 30th. For more information or to purchase a rain barrel online, visit enviroworld.ca. That's enviroworld.ca/Barrie. Now we move on to the circulation list. Any comments on the circulation list? We have two of them from April 14th. And tonight, April 25th. See no comments. That completes the General Committee meeting. The next City Council meeting will be held on Monday, May 2nd at 7 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.